Cormorants have web feet. They can swim. They can also hold their breath, dive and chase fish. Reportedly, they don't have good eyesight, but can still catch fish in murky water where visibility is limited, suggesting that the catching of prey is not related to vision. More likely, the fish are caught through auditory senses. Movement creates waves, and high-frequency waves with movement create a Doppler effect, and this is probably the means by which cormorants catch fish. There are multiple species of cormorants throughout the world. We have several in Australia, and today we want to look at the little pied cormorant. A pied bird with a yellow to orangish bill. A smaller crest than most cormorants. If fish are in the water, whether it's salt or fresh, you can find cormorants. They are poor flyers, so don't really fly out much to sea, but you can find them on the coast, estuaries and inland waterways. The classification of cormorants has changed a little bit over recent years. Traditionally, with feet like a pelican, they were placed in the order Pelecaniformes, and though closely related to herons, boobies and frigates, it seems that the pelican is a more distant relative. So they have been taken out of the Pelecaniformes into the Suliformes. So the Suliform order includes 4 families. Firstly, the sulids, or the gannets and boobies. Secondly, the frigate birds. The third one is the anhinga, or the darter. And of course, what we're looking at today, the cormorants, and in particular we want to look at one little cormorant, the little pied cormorant. And here it is doing what it likes to do, eat fish. The little pied cormorant has 3 subspecies divided geographically. The nominate subspecies is found in Australia and Southeast Asia, and 2 others, one in New Zealand and the other to the Solomon Islands. The only confusion with identification is between the pied and the little pied cormorant. The little pied, as its name suggests, is much smaller, and the pied cormorant, here on the lower section of the video, has yellow lores, which is in fact not feathered but a bare skin, and the distinctive orange-yellow bill of the little pied separates it. Here is the large pied cormorant fishing, a larger bird with the yellow coming from the bill up to the eye. A close-up view of the pied cormorant, showing the details on the face. Cormorants are flock birds, and before we get to the little pied, let's just look at some other cormorants commonly seen in Australia. Here you can see black cormorants with a large pied cormorant. These are little black cormorants. Then flying into the top of this tree to perch are the greater cormorants. Once again, these are very black birds. The little pied cormorant has a variable buoyancy on the surface, but then it dives and chases fish using its webbed feet. It also uses its wings for swimming underwater. After he's been underwater for a while, his feathers, which are very loosely bound, absorb water. So the bird needs to dry out, usually looking for a roosting site that's in the sun, turning his body so that the black feathers are facing towards the sun for maximum heat absorption. And with the wings extended, the bird dries out. After he's dried out, he will then fly off to a suitable fishing site, or to socialise, for these birds are flock birds. They will fish either as a flock or singularly. Here, flying under this sandbar, the cormorants roost and socialise. However, their socialisation is quiet, for they make very little in the way of sounds. For some unknown reason, suddenly, all these pied cormorants decide to take off. They go as a flock and fish. Here the little pied cormorants are fishing at Lake Macquarie, a saltwater lake. They will fish on the coast, but do prefer calmer waters. They usually bring the catch up to the surface for eating. When fishing as a group, they all seem to dive at the same time. After a group fishing expedition, they will often come and roost together, as on this boat jetty. After roosting, departure may be as a flock, small groups or individuals, leaving to go back into the water and chase fish. A wet cormorant is heavy and finds it difficult to fly, for intrinsically they are heavier birds. All the Sulidae are diving birds with a heavier bone structure to prevent water pressure, bone fracture. So when in flight, if they are low down close to the water, it usually means that they are still holding a lot of moisture in the feathers. for the feathers are very loosely knit, lacking the dense barbules, as for instance in the ducks. So with this ability for the feathers to hold water, the bird can dive to deeper depths, the feathers functioning like a weighted diving belt. Another way of telling in flight whether a cormorant has wet feathers or not is wing flapping. If they flap continuously, the bird is wet. Cormorants can soar on thermals, and they do this as a flock, but to get into the high altitudes they need dry feathers. To dry the feathers, the cormorants roost with outstretched wings. Most of the water birds and waders have long toes, but not the ducks. They only have webbing on 3 of the toes. Here this little pied cormorant has syndactyly, or the webbing, going between all 4 toes. The family name for the cormorants is Phyllacrocoracidae, derived from the Latin word for cormorant. The binomial name for the little pied cormorant is Microcarbomelanoleucos. Micro for small, carbos for charcoal, melanus for black, and leucos for white. So black of carbon with a dash of white. Notice how these birds catch and swallow the fish. The hook at the tip of the bill is used to secure the fish. The cormorant then lines the fish up so that its head will be swallowed first. Otherwise the fish scales will be pointing in the wrong direction for swallowing. Sometimes the fish will be crushed by the tip of the bill, and once the bird is happy it will flick the fish into the air, catch it again, then swallow. It is said that the vision of a cormorant isn't that good, but just watch this bird. When the fish escapes, how quickly it catches it again. But it didn't peck it from the surface. It's put its head under the water so it could hear the movements of the fish tail, and then secured it. I must admit, I'm a little uncertain about dismissing the role of vision in these birds, for the gannets and boobies, which are close relatives, do high dives, purely under vision, to catch fish maybe 20 metres below. This little pied cormorant is having a delightful day. The catch is one of its delicacies, an eel. It's cut the eel in 2. The smaller half is gone. The second half it doesn't know whether to eat it head first or tail first. As this little pied cormorant is fishing, it has to be very much aware of its buoyancy. If the bird starts to sink, it is absorbing too much water into the feathers. This will impair the bird's ability for flight. The cormorants usually have mid-body levels of flotation. In contrast, the anhinga, or the darter as we know it, is more submerged. The buoyancy level is determined by the feathers. With the absence of hook binding, penetration of water into the feather occurs. Now this can be minimised by preening using preen oil from the uropygial gland. So darters and cormorants, just like birds that spend a lot of time in flight, groom their feathers to perfection with a little bit of oil to keep the buoyancy just right. Well, we've seen these birds doing a lot of fishing, so now let's turn to the breeding habits of the little pied cormorant. These birds are colony birds, so when they usually breed in a group. Little pied cormorants are isomorphic, so I can't tell males from females. When in breeding mode, the crest in particular is a little bit more prominent, and it's the only time these birds vocalise, even if it is in grunts. And look at these 2 birds not sitting on the nest, they're out playing with a stick, and they have significant rufous coloration. Here, 2 young chicks have hatched. They are watched by one of the adults and the other is out fishing. When they come back, they will feed the chicks by regurgitation. Notice that the ibis are also nesting in the same tree. This is not unusual. Here is another little pied cormorant in close vicinity to the nest. Notice the rufous coloration, and I'm sure this increases during the breeding phase. Thank you for watching this video, and subscription to this channel entitles you for automatic notification of our next release of Australian birds in the wild.